Welcome to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. The first time I heard the Demon Rats and their allies in the propaganda press refer to the January 6th riot at the Capitol as an insurrection, I knew immediately what they were up to. In no way, shape, matter, form, or regard was the riot at the Capitol an insurrection. It was an illegal act. It was stupid. It was pointless. But unlike the lies we've been fed by the Democrats and the fake news, it was not an insurrection. I wrote a blog post about that dishonest wordplay tactic back on November 18th, 2022. So before I get into the renewed push for dishonesty using the word insurrection against Donald Trump, I'd like to read to you what I wrote about it last November. Here it goes. Is Donald Trump even eligible to be president again? Don't be so quick to answer that, because the answer isn't automatically yes. The 22nd Amendment doesn't allow one person to serve more than 10 years as president. That 10 years would be 2 full 4-year terms plus half of the predecessor's term if he ascended to the presidency from the vice presidency. But that doesn't apply here. Trump has only served 4 years, so the 22nd Amendment has no bearing. But the 14th Amendment might. Legally, the 14th Amendment has no bearing either, but that doesn't mean it won't come into play. Clause 3 of the 14th Amendment states, quote, "No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress, or elector of president and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States, or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress, or as an officer of the United States, or as a member of any state legislature, or as an executive or judicial officer of any state, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid and comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability." End quote. While that verbiage was included in the 14th Amendment to prevent Confederates of the Civil War from holding seats in government, Democrats will twist its meaning to include any Republican who did or said anything in support of the January 6th so-called insurrectionists that can be called aid and comfort. That epithet wouldn't be factually correct, but since when do facts matter to the Democrats? If Democrats are good at anything, they're good at bitter partisanship, lying, cheating, and weaponizing language to get their way. And it will score them a lot of political points among their dangerously destructive base. The reason the Democrats can get away with calling the January 6th riot an insurrection is because the activists posing as journalists in the propaganda press have amplified and will continue to amplify that lie via their onslaught of fake news. But the truth is the January 6th riot was not a coup attempt or an insurrection. Although the January 6th rioters at the Capitol had no chance of getting what they wanted, what they were seeking was 100% constitutional. They were not seeking to overturn an election or overthrow the government. They were simply demanding that Congress do what it is constitutionally allowed to do. Their means were criminal, but their intent was not. I'm not defending the riot. The riot was the most idiotic thing supporters of the Republican Party have ever done. I'm not defending the criminals who broke into the Capitol on January 6th. I'm just pointing out that what they wanted Congress to do was perfectly constitutional. It was just pointless because there was no chance they were going to convince Congress to do the right thing. But all those protesters wanted was for Congress to refuse to certify the electors from the states that conducted unconstitutional elections. I'm not talking about fraud. Whether fraud happened or not is irrelevant. It need not be brought up. I'm talking about the unconstitutional election processes that at least 7 states used in their 2020 elections. Is that my opinion? Yes. But it is also the opinion of judges in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin who ruled the loosey-goosey election processes in those states were, in fact, unconstitutional. The remedy for those unconstitutional elections is outlined in the Constitution of the United States. There's a Plan B and a Plan C, and they should have been used. But the Supreme Court refused to do its duty and rule on the merits of the disputed election results. And those state courts all ruled long after Biden was inaugurated, and it was too late to remedy the election theft. Congressional certification of the Electoral College vote is not merely a formality. The Constitution very specifically empowers Congress to be the final check that an election was lawfully conducted. And it very specifically allows any member of Congress to object to any electors for any reason. Regarding Congress refusing to certify the Electoral College count, let me remind you that in 2017, during the congressional certification of the 2016 election, Democrat Congressman Jim McGovern, Jamie Raskin, Pramila Jayapal, Raul Grijalva, Sheila Jackson Lee, Barbara Lee, and Maxine Waters all objected to some of Trump's Electoral College votes. Had any senators also objected, a vote would have been taken as to whether to accept or reject those contested Electoral College votes. And if both houses voted to reject them, the votes would not have been counted. That is a fact. And it was perfectly constitutional. What's pathetic is that most Americans are completely unaware that even happened. Why? Because the fake news won't report that historical fact, and the Republicans are incompetent with their messaging. To be clear, Vice President Mike Pence did not have the authority to reject Electoral College votes. Only senators and representatives did. And that's all they were asked to do by the protesters. It was a fool's errand, but it was not an unconstitutional request. And it wasn't an insurrection. The reason the Democrats have so dishonestly used that word is to weaponize it against Republicans. And they are certain to weaponize it against Donald Trump as he runs his 3rd presidential campaign. But the theory that Donald Trump can be denied elected office because of the 14th Amendment is not merely an academic discussion. There is precedent for it. Not for the presidency, but for a county commission seat in New Mexico. Couey Griffin was a county commissioner in Otero County, New Mexico. He was found guilty of entering the Capitol on January 6th. And a leftist activist judge in New Mexico named Francis Matthew ordered Griffin to be kicked off the commission because he was an insurrectionist. And yes, his order used the word insurrection. The judge wrote that Griffin took an oath to support the Constitution of the United States and then engaged in that insurrection after taking his oath. That judicial order was blatantly political. And it was blatantly unconstitutional because the January 6th riot was neither an insurrection nor a coup attempt, nor any attempt to overthrow the duly elected government of the United States, despite the Democrats and the fake news repeatedly saying it was. Of course, there's a big difference between an appointed low-level district judge in New Mexico and the 9 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. And if such dishonest partisan action was taken against Trump, It would eventually be reversed by the Supreme Court. But do we want to go through all that? Do we want the January 6th riot being the centerpiece of the 2024 election? If the state legislatures, or even just state election officials, were to state that Trump was ineligible to be president under the 14th Amendment, so they refused to put his name on the ballot, that would be a huge problem. I can certainly see election officials in California, New York, Illinois, and perhaps a dozen more dark blue states doing that, or at least trying to do it. Sure, Trump wouldn't win Electoral College votes from many of those states anyway, but if they refuse to put him on the ballot, the negative publicity of the judicial process as it wound its way through the Supreme Court would be harmful not just to Trump, but to all Republicans. And then when the Supreme Court properly ruled that the January 6th riot was not an insurrection and that Trump was not disqualified from holding office, that would motivate the partisan haters on the left to show up in huge numbers to vote against the so-called insurrectionist, the stacked Supreme Court put on the ballot. Republicans would be in a lose-lose position no matter what. All right, so that's what I posted to my blog at www.themikebatesshow.com on November 18th, 2022. When we get back from this break, I'll explain why I'm bringing it up again now, when the Mike Bates Show continues. Welcome back to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. As I wrote in my blog last November, in which I just read to you in the previous segment, the demon rats are trying to use the 14th Amendment to disqualify Donald Trump from holding any public office in the United States government ever again. They have seen the polling data that indicates their indictments against Trump have increased support for him, not reduced it. They're concerned that he may actually win another term in the 2024 presidential election. Now, I'm on the record believing he won't win again, and I see no reason to modify that belief. I still think Donald Trump will easily win the Republican nomination and then get slaughtered in the general election. But I do acknowledge that just because I think he will get slaughtered doesn't mean he will get slaughtered. Could he win? Sure. I think it's highly unlikely, but it's not impossible. But what would make a Donald Trump win impossible is if he's not on the ballot at all. That would be impossible to overcome. So that is what the Democrats are trying to set up. By referring to the January 6th riot at the Capitol as an insurrection, and by saying Trump engaged in it, they think they can keep him off the ballots in enough states that he cannot mathematically win. Well, can they? First of all, what is an insurrection? Was the January 6th riot at the Capitol violent? Yes, by some protesters, but not all protesters, and certainly not by Donald Trump. In fact, he asked his supporters, those present at his speech on the ellipse, to, quote, peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard, end quote. Here's a recording of those words.
Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
And when you look at the timeline of what happened on January 6th, the security perimeter surrounding the Capitol was breached by rioters at no later than 12:08 p.m. Eastern Time. I based that on the time-stamped tweet by CNN reporter Donnie O'Sullivan, who at 12:08 p.m. tweeted the words, quote, Trump protesters have broken through barriers at the U.S. Capitol, end quote, along with a 12-second video showing protesters inside the security fence running towards the Capitol building. So by 12:08 p.m. Eastern Time, Capitol security had been breached. And what time did Donald Trump ask his supporters to go to the Capitol? 8 minutes later, at 12:16 p.m. Eastern Time. And even then, he didn't say to go immediately. He said they would be going, and I should actually correct that, because Donald Trump didn't ask his supporters to go to the Capitol at all, not specifically. He said he knew they were going to the Capitol, so technically he didn't ask them to do it at all. He said he knew they would do it. But that may be nitpicking too much. Because the big fact is that he never asked for any violence at all. He didn't say violently and patriotically. He said peacefully and patriotically. But the point I'm making here is that just 8 minutes into his 71.5-minute speech, protesters had already breached the Capitol security perimeter. So how the hell did he instruct them to be violent? He didn't. Yet Special Counsel Jack Smith charged him with 4 crimes related to the events of January 6th. What were those crimes? 1 count of conspiring to defraud the government, 1 count of conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and 2 counts related to corruptly obstructing a congressional proceeding. What did Jack Smith not charge Donald Trump with? Insurrection or rebellion. Both insurrection and rebellion are federal crimes. They are both violations of 18 U.S. Code Section 2383. That law makes it a crime to engage in insurrection or rebellion. It says this, and I'm reading from the law directly, quote, "Whoever incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort thereto, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years, or both, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States." End quote. Did you notice the similarity to the verbiage of the 14th Amendment? The 14th Amendment uses the words, "shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof." That the 14th Amendment and Title 18 U.S. Code Section 2383 both use those words is not a coincidence. It was very deliberate. Because what Title 18 U.S. Code Section 2383 did was codify into law the already existing 14th Amendment ban on holding office under the United States. But it added fines and imprisonment. That, and it expanded who it applied to more than just people who had previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States. So if Donald Trump had engaged in insurrection or rebellion, or if he had given aid or comfort to people who did, then why did Special Counsel Jack Smith not charge him with that crime? Well, the obvious and only answer is that Jack Smith didn't believe Trump's actions vis-a-vis the January 6th riot met the requirements of the law. And keep this in mind also. Even if Jack Smith did charge Donald Trump with insurrection or rebellion, that doesn't mean Trump was guilty of it. A jury would have to decide that. Because due process is required under our Constitution, under both the 5th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. So those people who claim that Donald Trump is ineligible for the presidency again and think election officials can just on their own decide to keep him off the ballot based on their personal belief that he somehow engaged in insurrection or rebellion, well, they can't claim that they don't know what the 14th Amendment says because they base their false assertion on what the 14th Amendment says. They just believe that you are too ignorant to know what the 14th Amendment says. And so you'll just swallow whatever partisan tripe they're shoving down your throat. Now, you may not swallow it, but at least half the country will. But what if it wasn't just election officials acting on their own to deny Trump's presence on the ballot? What if state legislatures were to pass laws declaring that Trump was ineligible for the presidency? Well, that would be unconstitutional also. And Congress can't do it either. Because despite what the demon rats believe, Congress is not the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is. And any act of Congress that violates that Constitution is null and void. But on what do the demon rats base their allegation that Donald Trump engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or gave aid or comfort to those who did? They base it on absolutely nothing. That's what. There is no basis whatsoever to even remotely make such an assertion with even an iota of truth or legitimacy. But truth and legitimacy are not the goals of the Demon Rat Party. Power is the goal of the Demon Rat Party. The only thing the Demon Rats care about is power. And if they need to lie, cheat, steal, and violate our Constitution to gain or maintain power, so be it. The ends justify the means to them. Yes, Democrats are that evil. Democrats are that dishonest, that disgraceful, that disgusting, and that dangerous. Under no legitimate definition did Donald Trump engage in insurrection or rebellion. And that's why he wasn't charged with it. So if the weaponized and partisan special counsel didn't think Donald Trump engaged in insurrection or rebellion, then what about the charges against the rioters themselves? How many January 6th rioters were charged with insurrection or rebellion under Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 2383? Well, I looked it up, and it took me a while to count them. Not because I count slowly or because it takes a long time to count to a high number, but because I had to review the charges against the more than 1,000 defendants to see what the exact charges were. And do you know what the total number of people charged with insurrection or rebellion is? It's 0. Exactly 0. Not a single person who participated in the January 6th riot at the Capitol was charged with insurrection or rebellion under Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 2383. Why not? Because they didn't commit that crime. So if the actual rioters didn't engage in insurrection or rebellion, then how did the President of the United States engage in insurrection or rebellion? Especially in light of the provably accurate fact that he said they would peacefully and patriotically march to the Capitol. Yeah, that's right. The demon rats have so much hatred against Donald Trump that facts don't matter. They can just make things up. No matter how unconstitutional it may be, they can just make things up. And their idiot Democrat base will lap it up as if it's the nectar of the gods. And the fake news will give it credibility by amplifying the lies and by giving wide exposure to the purveyors of partisan hate and dishonesty. Will the effort to disqualify Donald Trump from appearing on the ballot succeed? No, not in the long run. There is no way on earth the Supreme Court would allow such a travesty of justice to stand. Even the court's leftists, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Brown-Jackson would probably rule that way. Well, Ketanji Brown Jackson might not. But if it were to reach the Supreme Court, it would probably be either an 8-1 decision or a rare unanimous decision in favor of Donald Trump. Or to be more precise in this instance, it would be in favor of the Constitution of the United States. Now, the Democrats won't acknowledge the indisputable truth that Donald Trump said his supporters would peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard. They ignore the provably accurate fact that Donald Trump never asked for a scintilla of violence at the Capitol that day. They dishonestly misrepresent the very obvious meaning of Donald Trump's use of the word fight. And because the Democrats know they can tell such lies, and that their allies in the fake news will not only not refute those lies, but will amplify them, they get away with it. But what Donald Trump said on January 6th is very clear to anyone not blinded by partisan hate. But Democrats are blinded by partisan hate, which is why they deliberately avoid any acknowledgement that Donald Trump said peacefully and patriotically, and focus instead on him saying people needed to fight like hell, as if that was a clear call for supporters to violently storm the Capitol. It wasn't, of course. So I'll address that when the Mike Bates Show continues. Welcome back to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. What did Donald Trump mean when he said, we fight like hell? And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. What did he mean by that? Did he mean to be violent? No, not at all. But that is what the demon rats have told us he meant. And that's what the fake news have spoon-fed us was his intent. But you'd have to be a real idiot to believe them. A few days ago, I looked back at my show notes from January 2021 when I analyzed Donald Trump's January 6th speech at the Ellipse. I had watched the speech, and then I read the transcript, and then I listened to the speech while reading the transcript. And I made notes about what Trump said in the speech compared to what the Democrats and the liars and the fake news said he said in the speech. And while I could explain it all again, I think what I said about Trump's January 6th use of the word fight on this radio program on January 16th, 2021, was so thorough and so accurate that I'd rather just play you a recording of what I said then. So that's what this segment of today's show will be. A playback of what I said 31 and a half months ago on January 16th, 2021. It's as true today as it was then. Here we go. So how does Donald Trump's January 6th speech that the Democrats used as false pretenses to impeach him compare to what Democrats have said? Some Democrats have called for actual violence. So Hillary Clinton can say this.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about.
But Donald Trump can't say this.
Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
So Democrat Attorney General Eric Holder can say this.
Michelle says that, when they go low, we go high. No. When they go low, we kick them. That's what this new Democratic Party is about.
But Donald Trump can't say this.
And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
So Democrat Congressman Joaquin Castro can say this.
We will challenge him in every way that we can. We'll challenge him here in Congress. We'll challenge him in the courts. We'll challenge him on the streets and protest. We'll do everything that we can to push back on what the president does.
But Donald Trump can't say this.
Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
So Democrat Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi can say this.
You have to be ready to take a punch. You got to be ready to take a punch. And therefore you have to be ready to throw a punch.
But Donald Trump can't say this.
And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
So Democrat Senator John Tester can say this.
I don't think even in states where Donald Trump won big that it does you any good running away from Donald Trump. I think you need to go back and punch him in the face. I mean, the truth is this guy is bad for this country.
But Donald Trump can't say this.
Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
So Congresswoman Maxine Waters can say this.
Let's stay the course. Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station. You get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
But Donald Trump can't say this?
And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
So Democrat Senator Cory Booker can say this.
That's my call to action here. Please don't just come here today and then go home. Go to the Hill today. Get up and please get up in the face of some Congress people.
But Donald Trump can't say this?
Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
So Democrat Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi can say this.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be when people realize that this is a policy that they defend.
But Donald Trump can't say this?
And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Now, if you go fact check those quotes, the so-called fact checkers in big media, who have so much advocacy bias that they misrepresent real facts in such a manner as to claim they're false, even though they're provably true, they'll tell you all those quotes were taken out of context, which they weren't. Or they'll tell you they were speaking figuratively, not literally. And that much is true, at least for some of them. But Maxine Waters was instructing her sycophantic supporters to literally harass Republicans. Cory Booker was telling the protesters to literally get up in the face of some Congress people. But when Donald Trump says the word fight, as in, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore?
If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
The lying Democrats in Congress and in the press say that Trump meant to literally fight, as in go to war with machine guns and kill everyone on the other side? I mean, if that was just inflammatory rhetoric by the dishonest Democrats, we could dismiss it as typical Democrat dishonesty amplified by the fake news. But the president used the word fight in the exact same way other politicians ask their supporters to fight for the cause. He in no way asked for violence. In fact, he asked for exactly the opposite when he asked the crowd to march over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
Okay, so that recording's over, and we're back to today, September 2nd, 2023. In his January 6th speech, Donald Trump said the word fight or fighting a total of 20 times. And not once did he mean fight in the sense of physical violence. All 20 times he meant it as in work hard. The Democrats know that. The fake news knows that. But they think if they force-feed you the lie that he used the word fight as a command to his supporters to go attack the Capitol, kill police officers, and mount a coup against the government of the United States, that the country will believe it and never again vote for Trump because of it. Now, I know that doesn't apply to everyone. I know that the more the demon rats unjustly attack Donald Trump via their weaponized government, the stronger Trump's supporters support him. But I also know that Trump supporters do not constitute a majority of the electorate. Democrats don't need everyone to vote against Trump. They only need a majority to vote against Trump. And so they're launching these attacks for the purpose of weakening the level of support Trump may have among the mushy middle. This isn't about getting everyone to hate Trump. It's about getting enough people to hate Trump that he can't win another election. And I see them succeeding in that goal through the use of these phony criminal charges that will turn the mushy middle against him, while simultaneously forcing Trump off the campaign trail, where he would otherwise be drumming up support by responding to their lies with the truth. The Democrats have not only weaponized government against Donald Trump, they intend to use the power of government to sideline him from the campaign trail. And just in case that fails, their backup plan is to deny him a place on the ballot based on their lies about the so-called insurrection of January 6th and the disqualification clause of the 14th Amendment. The attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021 was illegal and stupid, but it wasn't an insurrection. But by calling it an insurrection with no real pushback from the weak Republican establishment, the Democrats are now pursuing the disqualification of Trump as a candidate based on that lie. The demon rats planted the seed for what they are doing today 32 months ago. Will it work to keep Trump off the ballot? Probably not. I'd even say certainly not. But it will cost the Republicans millions of dollars to win the court victories that will deny the demon rats' scheme to deny Trump, and by association Trump supporters, another chance at another term in the White House. All right, we're a little late on our final break. I've got to take it now, and when we get back, I'll quickly wrap things up. When the Mike Bates Show continues. Welcome back to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. Donald Trump faces 91 felony counts across his 4 trials. And every single count, with the possible exception of the ones about his handling of classified information, are completely partisan accusations for things that are absolutely constitutionally protected activities, but that the demon rats have twisted into alleged crimes for the sole purpose of preventing a second Trump term in the White House. They have weaponized the court system to persecute and prosecute him, to keep him off the campaign trail as much as possible, and to force him to spend millions of dollars to defend himself against these unconstitutional charges that have been made against him. Using money that would be better spent on campaign activities. Not to mention the amount of Trump's time it will take from time he should be campaigning, but will instead be spent with lawyers preparing for trial and being in trial. Can you think of a more effective way to weaken your biggest political rival than that? These are the tactics of third world dictators. These are not the tactics of officials who respect the constitutional processes and procedures of our republic. But Democrats are enemies of our Constitution. They are enemies of our freedom. They are enemies of our rights. They are enemies of our nation. And yet half the country is applauding their disgustingly unconstitutional and disgracefully partisan weaponization of government against Donald Trump. And by extension, against every single Republican. So how do they intend to destroy Trump's chance of winning another term as president? Well, we've discussed it on today's program and on others. First, it was the big lie that Trump colluded with the Russians to win in 2016. That has been proven to not only be false, but it has been proven to have originated in the campaign of Hillary Clinton, with the full knowledge and support of high-ranking officials in the FBI and our intelligence services. Then they impeached him over his phone call with the president of Ukraine by falsely portraying his request for an investigation into Hunter Biden's likely illegal dealings there. Then they impeached him again for trying to overthrow the United States government, even though under no sane definition did he even come close to that. Then they piled on with 91 felony charges against him, most of which would not be crimes, even if he did what they say he did. I know I've left out many of the demon rats' unjust attacks on Trump. Time doesn't allow me to list them all. But now they're trying to keep him off the ballot by invoking this phony 14th Amendment crap. In no way whatsoever does Section 3 of the 14th Amendment have any applicability to Donald Trump. None. Yet the demon rats are trying to use it to keep him off the ballot. And don't be surprised if this effort to keep his name off the ballot occurs after he has secured the Republican nomination. And as I said earlier, they won't succeed on that. Donald Trump will be on the ballot in every state, no matter what tactics leftist election officials use to try to prevent it. And the Democrats know this latest attack will not succeed. They know the courts will ultimately overturn their dishonest and unconstitutional attempt at election theft via the 14th Amendment argument. But they also know that Donald Trump will be hurt by it no matter what, which is why they're doing it. And the reason I'm doing this, the reason I'm talking about it today, is because as Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, you have to know your enemy. Well, the biggest enemy of the United States today is the Democrat Party. That is not hyperbole. Not since the Civil War in the 1860s has the United States faced such an existential threat. It was the Democrat Party that was the enemy of our republic then, and it is the Democrat Party that is the enemy of our republic today. I'm Mike Bates. Thanks for listening.